Today, we are digging into one of the most powerful glitches in our thinking. It's called confirmation bias. It's this invisible force that pretty much makes us see exactly what we expect to see. We're going to break down how it works, where it's hiding in plain sight, and, maybe most importantly, what you can actually do about it. So, to get started, we're not going to begin with some dry textbook definition. Instead, let's kick things off with a story. It sets up this simple, but you'll see, pretty profound puzzle about how we all see the world. And it really just starts with one simple question. And that question is this: is it possible for two people to look at the exact same set of facts, the very same evidence, and walk away with completely opposite takeaways? Let's find out. Okay, so picture this. Two friends are sitting in a remote Alaskan bar. One's a priest, the other is a staunch atheist. And the atheist starts telling this story about how he got completely lost in a terrible blizzard. He's alone, he's freezing, he's given up all hope. So he falls to his knees and he just prays, "Oh God, if there is a God, I'm gonna die if you don't help me." Hearing this, the priest's eyes light up and he says, "Well then you must believe now. I mean, you're here, you're alive." But the atheist just kind of rolls his eyes. He says, "No, that's not what happened at all. A couple of local hunters just happened to come wandering by and showed me the way back to camp. You see? For the priest, those hunters were an answer to a prayer. They were a miracle. For the atheist, they were just hunters. Same exact event, two completely different realities. So what on earth is going on here?" Well, that story, it perfectly illustrates the phenomenon we're talking about today. It's the way our beliefs act like a filter for reality. And this mental shortcut, it has a name, and it's one of the most powerful traps that our minds can fall into. It's called the confirmation trap. So confirmation bias, in a nutshell, is our brain's natural tendency to cherry-pick information that just so happens to confirm what we already believe. It's actually an efficiency hack. Our brains evolved to make super fast decisions for survival, right? So we look for patterns that fit the map of the world we've already drawn. But the problem is, this means we're actively searching for, interpreting, and even remembering things that support our views, while conveniently ignoring anything that might challenge them. And, believe it or not, this isn't some new psychological fad. The philosopher Francis Bacon described this exact tendency perfectly all the way back in 1620. He saw that once our mind settles on an opinion, it goes to work to protect that opinion, basically drawing everything else towards it to prove that it was right all along. Stories and old quotes, they're really powerful. But what about some hard evidence? I mean, it's one thing to see this in a little anecdote, but it's another thing entirely to see how it can systematically warp even objective information. So let's look at how this bias plays out in the data with a couple of really surprising studies that show just how deep this trap goes. So our first case study comes from the world of software engineering. Researchers had a question. If you gave 26 experienced professional managers a set of perfectly neutral data, would they interpret it objectively? These managers were shown data from 16 different projects. Now, the crucial part here, the really important bit, is that this data was randomly generated. That means there was no hidden pattern, no secret advantage for either hourly or fixed price contracts. It was designed from the ground up to be completely neutral, basically a blank slate for them to interpret. So what happened? Well, the results were just fascinating. Of the managers who already liked fixed-price contracts, a huge majority found evidence in that neutral data that supported, you guessed it, fixed-price contracts. And the managers who came in preferring hourly contracts, they looked at the exact same data and found support for their preference. They all looked at the same facts and saw exactly what they wanted to see. Okay, so that's managers. But surely scientists, people literally trained in objectivity, they'd be immune to this, right? Well, a second study analyzed 35 different scientific papers. All these papers were comparing two competing software models, one called analogy-based and another called regression-based. The researchers then did what's called a meta-analysis, which is basically a study of studies, and they combined the results from all 35 papers. And the conclusion at first seemed crystal clear. The combined data showed that the analogy-based models were, on average, more accurate. A pretty straightforward scientific finding. Or was it? So here's the twist. The researchers noticed something a little fishy. In 20 of those 35 studies, the scientists doing the evaluation were actually evaluating an analogy-based model that they themselves had developed. I mean, they had a personal stake in their own model being the best one. So the big question is, what happens if you just take those 20 potentially biased studies out of the equation? Well, the entire scientific conclusion flips completely on its head. When you only look at the 15 independent, unbiased studies, the evidence now shows that the regression models are more accurate. The bias wasn't just there, it was strong enough to completely reverse a published scientific consensus. And you can see this same dynamic playing out everywhere, right? From our online filter bubbles to our deeply divided political arguments. So the really crucial point here is that this isn't about being smart or being an expert. It's about how our brains are fundamentally wired. Think of it like a visual illusion. You know these, right? Do you see a young woman or an old one? Which of those blue circles is bigger? In both of these, your brain is taking a shortcut to give you a quick answer. Well, confirmation bias is the exact same thing. It's just happening with our complex beliefs instead of simple images. Understanding the problem, that's the first step, but it's not enough. This bias is automatic, so fighting it has to be intentional. So how do we actually fight back against this powerful built-in tendency? Let's talk about how to break the bias. Here's a simple 3-step toolkit you can use. First, actively seek disagreement. Don't just look for evidence that supports your idea. Deliberately go out and search for information that challenges your beliefs. Second, question your own certainty. If you read something and it immediately feels right, if it confirms everything you believe, treat that feeling with a healthy dose of skepticism. And third, and honestly this is the hardest one, prioritize the truth over your own ego. Focus on discovering what is right, not on proving that you were right all along. And that brings us to this final, really powerful thought from the philosopher W.V. Quine. He separates that thirst for truth from the pride that can blind us. See, the desire to be right, that drives us forward to find answers. But the desire to have been right, that just keeps us stuck where we are. So the question I want to leave you with is this: which one of those desires is driving you?